to Personnel Committee that's here and made it on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. This meeting is being held on the traditional unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh Coast Salish peoples. And reminder, the meeting is being live streamed with the audio and visual recording available to the public for view after the meeting. Footage of the meeting may be viewed inside and outside of Canada. It's a reminder of our meeting decorum. It's our last meeting before summer, so I'll just take half of that. All members and delegates request to speak through the chair. Civility towards others is maintained as stakeholder representatives and trustees. Share perspectives and participate in the debate. Staff be able to submit effective without influence or pressure as they're change. Committee members refrain from personal, inflammatory, language or action. Members, trustees, representatives, and staff present themselves in a professional way. So, starting with first point of the delegation, none this evening. Number 2, information items. We start with 2.1, French Immersion Recruitment and Retention. Local Superintendent Batista and Director of Education Programs.
So I will just start it and then I'll go to Director Kehoe and finish up with the survey. So we have a report in the package, just sort of outlining some background information about the grant program that we have in Vancouver that has existed for 45 years. Currently about 10% of our population do enroll in French immersion programs, and you can see the stats on the page. We have always been very active in our French recruitment and have always gone outside of BC to recruit for many years, but over the last 2 years it has really been a push to ensure that we are filling all vacancies and are on call with qualified French immersion teachers. So at this point, I'm actually going to pass it to Adrian to talk a little bit about sort of other things that are going on to support French immersion in our district, and then I'll talk about a survey that I did with in collaboration with the Vancouver Teachers Federation to survey immersion teachers.
Thank you. Great to be here. Good to see everybody. So as we always say, we are very proud of our French immersion program. We've been recruiting, as Carmen mentioned, for many decades. I was one of a group of people who came 30 years ago from Ontario. To stay here, but part of a cohort of 3 people who came here together from the same career fair 30 years ago. So we do know that's one of our most successful strategies. So we have continued to engage in new strategies across the country and elsewhere to that end. Many of our strategies are working really closely with our universities here in the Lower Mainland. We work very closely with SFU and UBC on a regular basis, and usually in September we're the first school district to meet to get in front of the French immersion students. We invite them all here in September as soon as they are available to come down and meet with us and meet with them throughout the year as well. So that those certainly are one of our biggest stakeholders and partners at UBC. We recruit many people from them every year. So in the report, there's a number of other projects and initiatives that we are certainly very proud of. One of our biggest strategies is to be very present in the French Francophone and the Francophone communities in BC and across the country. We work very closely with a lot of our neighboring districts and other partners as well. So I just outlined a couple of things that we have been part of this year. So first, in front of you, earlier in the year, the Office of the Commissioner of Official Languages did a news release, and they worked with us and Canadian Parents for French to host the event. So even though, I mean, they could have gone to anywhere in the country, we were quite happy that they chose Vancouver to make this announcement. And really, it was a report that had already been not published, but it had already been referenced in many reports leading up to that point. But it was a great opportunity for us to invite some of our local partners together and have that discussion. And our superintendent was one of the speakers of that day, that we are appreciative of her kind, welcoming words in French on that day. Another project that we've been involved with this year for the first time, there's a French language monitoring agreement. So we're one of only 4 districts in BC who have just recently signed this agreement. So we've had for many years language monitors from across the country, but for the first time we're actually working with our partners in Marseille and Nice. And so we do have one language monitor coming in September, just going through the immigration protocol at the moment. This program has been existing in universities primarily for 30 or 40 years, and it's the first time that they've reached out to public schools, to public school districts to host language monitors. So the requirement is that young students between the age of 22 and 35 who already have an undergraduate degree and are thinking about education, so they will come work with us. We pay them through our federal grants that we get for language support, and they will be working in our schools alongside our teachers, doing monitor agreement, not assistants. They're a small group of students and only students under the direction of teachers. French language programs, whether that be immersion or core or intensive French. Next, we also recently in April signed an agreement with our partners in France. So we're one of 11 districts who got to the point of reaching an agreement with our partner. And really, the initiative is around working collaboratively across countries. So we have a long history of French immersion. And in the south of France, they're really introducing English immersion at the moment. So they're very interested in learning from us. So we have opportunities for our teachers to go overseas and for our partners to come here to work together, not just to do teacher exchanges. That certainly is the goal, is to recruit people, to recruit teachers, but also at the same time, we can work together to share our expertise from there. It's always a compliment that people want to work with us, and we hear great things about our district and our province. So we certainly are welcoming opportunities to with them. Partners were here twice this year already, meeting with schools and teachers, just looking at opportunities. So the opportunities include student exchanges, short-term and long-term, individual student exchanges, group exchanges, and for teachers to go back. A small advancement in our work, but today we just signed one of our first, we actually recruited one of the teachers when we were there recently, so she'll be working with us in September. So I'm quite happy to have that result so quickly. Next is the Canadian Parents for French. So we work with them. For many years, we did have quite a strong chapter in the Vancouver city. Currently, we have many dozens of parents who are part of Canadian Parents for French, but there's no local chapter per se. So we hosted a meeting several weeks ago with Canadian Parents for French at one of our elementary schools and sent a message to all families of French immersion students to see if there was interest in forming a local chapter. So we had representatives from 12 schools at that meeting, and they have since taken that away, and amongst themselves, they're looking to form an executive and to start a local chapter. So in the past, when we did have Vancouver French chapter, each school was able to have a rep on that committee, similar to DPAC. And so we look forward to seeing how to work with them in the upcoming months. And finally, the federal government support. So you may have seen Minister Joly was here a few weeks ago and speaking to an announcement that had taken place in the past, but she was really highlighting the initiatives that have been taking place with the federal government. So last year they announced a $62 million investment in French language education. So half of that was going to the CSF programs across the country, and the other half, so quickly do the math, 32 million, 10 provinces and jurisdictions. So it may not look a lot as a dollar value, but actually just yesterday I was speaking with our colleagues in Victoria, and there is the round table. So all of our various groups, or most of our groups in the round here, trustees, superintendents, teachers, administrators, were part of that group. So the provincial group has just sent in their request for recruitment initiatives through the federal government, and they disperse that money province or territory basis. So we are happy to have been part of that discussion indirectly through our various reps, and that is a commitment for over the next 4 years. So we'll be looking to work with our colleagues in Victoria and around the province and some provincial initiatives to expand our recruitment. So back to my colleague.
So as you can see, school services, learning services, and employee services work very closely together on a number of issues. So we have been talking for a while to try to determine what is the reason some of our French immersion teachers are not staying. So we developed a survey in collaboration with the Vancouver Teachers Federation. Simple, short survey, because people don't survey often, and they just, we wanted to get a good response. So we targeted current teachers, and then we asked them to forward it on to former French immersion teachers to see why they left French immersion. Out of about 300 teachers, 148 responded. So that was a very, very, very impressive response rate to the survey. We had 6 questions, and we made sure that they understood that it was a confidential survey. So what you're going to see are themes. It's not necessarily individual survey responses, but themes that were taken out. So the first question was basically, how many years have you been teaching? Sort of just to get a baseline of our French immersion staff. And as you can see, from a beginning teacher to almost 30 years, 35 plus years up there. So we have quite a range of new and more experienced teachers, more experienced teachers. So out of our 148. Second question was, we wanted to find out, are they working in a single track, so all French? Is it a dual track, English, French? Or are they working in English? That would indicate that they had left French immersion. As you can see, most of the respondents, over 90 of them, are working in a dual track school. Have you moved from French immersion into English? We wanted to find out how many individuals had done that. And we had, out of 143 that responded, 8% of them. 12. Then we asked with question 3 again, because some of them were 2-parters, the reason for moving from English to French, moving to English from French immersion, the sort of the school location, only 2 had thought that, more comfortable teaching English, parental involvement, lack of resources, and then the other. And so under the question other, the common themes was lack of resources. And when I say lack of resources, a number of them have said that in English, it's really easy to find material, but in French, it's really challenging. And that the material necessarily in Quebec doesn't, it's some, but it's also challenging to get some things from France. So this is information that's going to be really helpful for myself and services to sort of develop and strategize on some retention issues for our teachers. A number of them responded that it's challenging to teach French immersion when students are not exposed outside. So you have a dual track school, and then at recess and lunch they're out there speaking English, and they go home and they're speaking English. So some teachers found that was a bit challenging. Keeping some students engaged and motivated, that was sort of viewed a few times. Some pressures from parents and the level of involvement and the school location. So that was sort of the themes that we've read under other for the people that left French immersion. Are you thinking of leaving French immersion? And this was worrisome to me because 26 responded yes, that they were thinking of it. And so this is the retention piece that we need to focus on and look at, and looking at what the responses and the whys of, why are they thinking of leaving? 139 responded to this question. Again, school location, school philosophy, lack of resources, more comfortable teaching English, parental involvement, and other. And themes that came under other, teachers were expressing that the social dynamics are complex, that classroom management is quite challenging. Finding that, especially younger, the responses that students are often not interested in speaking French at the younger age, at the beginning ages, and they're not engaged in learning a language. That's not sort of what the teachers were responding. The lack of available resources, and they often must create their own. This was repeated throughout the questions, was that they're having basically to take an English resource and translating it so that they can use it with their students. So that requires a lot of preparation time, and that's a lot of time of their own. And then some parental pressures. They felt that profound parental involvement. Is there anything the board can do to encourage you to stay teaching in French immersion? We did ask that. And so subsidized tuition was a response, what we had put out, bursary for summer learning, additional courses or training, increased mentor support, and that was heavily responded to as well, and then other. And under question 5, other, so additional training courses. So Adrian, we started our dialogue about what could we do to support our French teachers and strengthen their French skills. Mentorship was a common theme through a number of the respondents. a way to share. So people are doing their resources, they're taking the English, they're translating into French. Probably someone else in another school is doing the same. So, you know, how can we share the resources? What methods and training and supporting new teachers? Bursaries to attend summer learning, and I know that there are some opportunities, and Adrian does, but, you know, maybe we need to get that out there a bit more. Some collaboration time, again, sharing resources, release time to work with colleagues, getting the groups together. Funds to translate resources. Maybe they don't have the time, but maybe we could get someone to do the translations for us. Specialist teachers in French. So, you know, we've been pretty good at making sure that our enrolling classes and our reading recovery, but sometimes there have been situations in prep or in resource that it's been an English teacher. So making sure we have specialist teachers in all French. Offer French courses to SSAs, having that opportunity so that they're in their classroom, because a lot of times the SSAs are speaking English with the students that they're working with, or students. So making sure that maybe they can help them with the language. They asked for a higher salary for a specialty position and student loan forgiveness. So these were sort of common themes. And when I say common, it was probably at least 20 or 30 individuals had responded to these sort of things. It was very fulsome, lots of paragraphs when looking at the questions and their responses. Is there anything else you can provide that would assist the board with understanding how to support French immersion teaching in the district? Mentorship, again, was very, very important, and sharing of resources and ideas. One suggestion was, why don't you create a French immersion newsletter that you could send out to French immersion teachers, saying, here are some resources. So that was a great idea. Again, resource and specialist teachers in French. Pro D for French teachers delivered in French. They asked, a few of them asked, why is this survey in English? I'm doing the survey, I'm not French, but, you know, valid point. French support for the new curriculum. As the new curriculum's coming in, how are we supporting our French teachers? And again, the prep for French immersion, because they are having to create a lot of it from English. So they want a little bit more prep time to be recognized. There's lots of responses here, so I tried to summarize summer programs. And again, you know, Adrian, we do have some opportunities. There's some Quebec opportunities and some, you know, we've done Calgary IF training, so there is some funds to do that. They wanted financial incentives to sustain French immersion, start French immersion at a later rate, because a number of the primary teachers were responding that, you know, some of them are really engaged and some of them want to play and they really don't want to learn a necessarily language. Interesting comments that came from a number of people was to eliminate the dual track schools, because they felt that the inequality was amplified at sites. And also what came through was that the English opportunity for the French students was there for them to not be fully immersed in the language. Better support for students who have special needs in French. A French support team that could help out and come out and help students that are struggling. Considering student needs and whether the French program is the right program for that student to be successful, and ensure that the students that we are enrolling are actually wanting to be there. Social, emotional, mental health, behavior, a number of respondents. And another suggestion was doing a 60-40 right, or 80-20, 100%, 80-20, then it goes to 50-50. Yeah. So these were some, again, it was a number of respondents, you know, almost half of the respondents that received it. So it was big data and information for us to start with and look at. And see it on that report. Immersion. Lots of information.
Yeah. Okay, assuming there might be some questions on this. I'm sure they'd like to start that.
Is there a French immersion GSA?
Through the chair, yes. Just modern language teachers. MLT, TLA. Yeah.
Definitely modern languages, but
yes,
not
modern language.
not
Provincial Specialist Association, and usually there are local specialist associations through that provincial one. So when you're talking about when people are talking about getting together, that's a model that could be used if there was a local specialist association, French immersion teachers to get together.
There's a provincial, sorry, through the chair, there is a provincial association. I forget what it is. It's APIC, I forget what it stands for, the French phrase, of the Association of Teachers.
I do have a question through the chair. I'd just like to begin it with a bit of a personal anecdote. That's I see my little corner of the world, and I mean, in the report that's been provided for information, I see all the initiatives that we are undertaking to increase our recruitment, and I am really aware that recruitment is a problem. And one of the anecdote I'd like to share is my child at my child's school is French. I'm in French. My children are French immersion, and my child has not had a proper homework teacher since about February. We've had our rotation of TOCs and subs, but we've been unable to find a permanent teacher, for months. And I understand another 6th, 7th class in our school, is also currently without a teacher, and the staff are doing as best they can, platooning and sharing the burden. So to me, I mean, that's an anecdote, and that speaks of some strains in the system as far as recruitment and hiring, I guess. And so my question ultimately is, those are anecdotes. Do we have any numbers with regards to the number of French immersion vacancies that are unfilled, or French immersion vacancies that are filled by teachers that are not comfortable teaching French? And the reason I ask is because I'm bringing you an anecdote, and it's been months, but it would be useful, I think, for everybody to have some clarity on exactly what, how big those gaps actually are.
Chair, so at this time, I believe that, as you said, there were certain situations where there have been teachers that have had to backfill, and we do have a number of on-call French immersion teachers that would prefer to stay on call and not accept long-term assignments. So when an absence turns into more than 3 days, 4 days, then they, prefer not to stay into the assignment, and so that sometimes, unfortunately, does require another on-call person and so on. We do have a pool of French immersion teachers. Their preference is to be on call, and they do not want long-term contracts. So, when an absence is reported, it's not necessarily known if it's going to go long or short. If it's a posted vacancy, job is posted because it's more than 3 months in a day, then of course qualified candidates should be applying to it, and they would be the ones that would be hired. I think I'm not sure the situation at your school. It might be that it was an absence that was unexpected, and then just kept on being extended. That's generally when it's been trickier to fill, when it's a posted vacancy. So we know that the individual is going to come 3 months in a day. It's much easier to fill, and the person that we know is applying to it, we know this person's qualified.
So through the chair, and again, thank you for the information. Again, I'm not necessarily familiar with how all of this happens, but I mean, I guess my question is still, how prevalent is this through the system? I know a number of years ago, we heard the same feedback. So the question is still, do we have any numbers, anything concrete that tell parents that this is the prevalence of this sort of thing happening throughout the system, where they're either unable to find somebody, those vacancies are simply not going filled, they're being covered by a vice principal or something, or other instances where the vacancy is filled by somebody who cannot be trenched. So do we have any numbers on those?
I would have to go and but I can tell you that this year was way better than last year.
Again, it's just an anecdote from my little part of the world, and I'm just asking about that. Thank you.
I have a question, but it relates to one of the slides. I think one of the data said that 90 of the respondents were from dual track schools. And
about 95 of them.
And a smaller number from single track. Does that more or less, do we have more dual track teachers in dual track schools and teachers in French immersion schools? Does that reflect the population of teachers in Vancouver?
So through the chair, there are 5 sites that are single track French, 5 out of the 17. So proportionately, it's about a quarter. 200 French immersion teachers. That's equivalents, but what?
Thank you, Chair. I just would like to acknowledge my colleague and the efforts to survey our members and ask these questions. And I am happy that you noted mentorship as a key piece that is very much needed, certainly in French immersion or any area of study. But mentorship is key to recruitment and retention and keeping teachers and supporting them and making them the very best that they can be from very early on in their career and throughout. I certainly appreciated hearing that that was reflected in the survey that you shared with us. So thank you again.
Yeah, so through the chair, I think just to echo Trina's point, some of that information doesn't surprise us. It's kind of what we've heard anecdotally as well, but it's really helpful to have kind of some hard data to go back to. Certainly the resource piece is something that we've heard a lot around as well. And I know people had some creative ideas around, things that, I mean, we're bound by collective agreement issues for some of those pieces for sure. But I think that gets us in a position where we can talk about some creative things about how to support our French immersion teachers so that we continue to retain them and we don't lose them and either leave French immersion and go to the English track or out of the district altogether, right? So they weren't necessarily surprising results, but it's good to kind of read hearing as one-offs and see that maybe there's a bigger picture piece there.
And through the chair. So recently I met with Superintendent and Committee Parents for French. They played an active role in the previous structure that exists at our Modern Language Advisory Committee. So we're just speaking recently about how we can re-engage that committee, which would include teachers, of course, and as well. That might be one way we can tackle it as a system, as a formal structure. Hearing more about that.
I do have a few. Trustee Chapman is still tonight, but she asked that I relay a question. In the report, a number of steps are outlined to address ongoing demand for French immersion teachers. Thanks to staff in finding different ways to address this issue. How are we tracking the effective steps? For example, I'd like to know how many teacher candidates from BC SFU based in our district, how many of them stay on. So just, guess on that.
Through the chair, I can start. So difficult to have a number today, but it certainly is easy enough to get that information. We do know that we hire over half of the graduating class in BC usually, and a high number of those in French.
You know that in the last 2 years, we did email. We did hire 106 French immersion qualified teachers in 2 years, and we had so we hired them on. So we recruited over 100 French immersion teachers, but they did wind up being almost left. And part of our understanding that we had was that closer to a lot of it was
Is there an actual exit?
it was when they were resigning.
I just have a few questions for myself. With the arrangement with France, what is the sort of visa situation? What has come out of that process?
So it is a lengthy process as it is in general. With the French monitor program, the MSc is working with us to expedite that process because those are, I guess, an area where they have understanding of having non-teachers come to work in post-secondary. So we're having part of that language monitor program. So they're not teachers yet, but our goal certainly is to entice freshmen who are here. So, and otherwise, like for example, today we made an offer to one of the teachers that we met. Regular process of teacher regulation and immigration. So no special favors per se, no special process, but the influence that we have all other professions.
Place services as me filling out forms and saying that we have employment for them and contract. So we are working with the individuals that we are recruiting in the country. We've done that with SSAs from Ireland and some other employee groups. So it is.
Yes, Gord?
Just a comment and a question to share on the survey. Noted it was interesting that some of the feedback from the survey was to teachers interested in seeing more late immersion and single track schools. Would you be able to speculate at all what the next steps, what steps might be taken based on those particular pieces of feedback from the survey? Yes, I know it's speculation.
I don't think I want to speculate, but I think at this point, the survey really was to help us understand how to support our French immersion teachers and some actions that we could take immediately in supporting them over the next year. In terms of dual track and single track, I think that's a longer discussion.
Is intensive French considered, excuse me, in the French immersion area?
They're one of our French programs.
Through the chair, not French immersion, but it's a core French program. Yes. The language is taught intensely for 5 months in grade 6, as opposed to an immersion subject.
What do you think about the idea of every student getting?
Sure, other provinces have done it, and I like the idea, and I just know it would be extremely challenging to have enough teachers who have that level of French who can teach full-time in French language to all grade 6s. Entire city where we have over 3,000 grade 6s. A lot of challenge. Philosophically, I think it's great. That practical for out there.
I have one more question. No more questions. My last question. So with the Francophone history, is there a chance to work with them, sharing resources, leadership?
So through the chair, so we do work with them closely too on professional levels. The association, and looking at Trina, ACP and Modern Language Teachers Association, so we often work together. We have teacher reps on those associations. We share, and sometimes they actually provide to our teachers too. Recruiting, like we may sometimes recruit people who are Francophone and don't have enough English to work in our system. So we have, shared staffing in a way, or suggested that we could help them secure employment with our neighbor at the CSM. Certain language standards in both. They attend our negotiation meetings through that work. Hosted events here for the human resources, employee services groups of the metro area, and they attend and Carmen has been in touch with them and part of some of the other recruitment. When we are recruiting back east or in Alberta, which is east, I guess, so they're often alongside us too. Together.
Who were some of the trustees last year? They're all quite impressive, and we had quite special relationship and to leverage resources.
Yeah, through the chair, that is one of the challenges of it. There's not really a market for French immersion resources, but the Francophone resources are great. And a 12-year-old who's growing up in Francophone town not necessarily the same literacy in French. So that is one of the big challenges that teachers have.
Okay, so seeing no further questions, we'll move on to 2.2, employee wellness and engagement. Director Services.
Thank you. So, through the chair, so we did the report, and we have a PowerPoint to go with the report. One of our goals, of course, is to ensure that our employees are well and engaged and healthy, and we are working on strategies of, one of the things in the budget was for wellness and mental health. Director Russell will take us through some of these.
It's a musical night tonight.
Not working, Alan.
Sorry.
So, yeah, and so through our employee family, our EFAP reporting, our health leads, we start to sort of get some background in our employee data. But again, it's about collecting data and how we can support our employees well. And I'll turn it over to Director Russell.
Thank you. So we just wanted to begin with summarizing a little bit of some of the work that we did in wellness over the 2018-19 school year. So first of all, we wanted to talk about mental health because that is the leading disability according to Health Canada in the workplace. And the stats that we have from them is 1 in 5 people in Canada will personally experience a mental health issue, and that number increases by age 40. About 50% of the population will have had or will have a mental health issue. At BSB, we ran some numbers, and about 70% of our employees are age 40 or older. So that represents a significant number. The priorities that we made for 2018 and 19 was on mental health. Specifically, we had some feedback from our employees through professional development days that we had done in previous school years. And a big item was actually compassion fatigue. So a little later, I'm going to report out on a code session that we did to focus on that. And also, we know through research that sleep, physical activity, nutrition, and drug usage can also impact mental health. So we also wanted to talk about and focus on those. So while this might have started off a little gloomy, it wasn't my intention. Basically, what can we do? We can have a culture of care. We can provide early intervention, and we can respond effectively, and everyone has a role to play in that. And through this presentation, I hope to show what it is that we're doing with our stakeholders and with employee services to do that. So this is a drawing by our new employee advisor from wellness background, which we've been very lucky to recruit in September of 2018. And in this diagram, at the bottom, you see an ambulance. And so basically, that's where our disability management happens. This is when our employees have already gone off on a health leave. So there's a lot of time spent dealing with people who are on a leave. And the goal is to have people farther up away from where those people are right now, is they're right on the verge of the cliff. We're trying to move people away from the cliff. So the little dotted line is a safety net. And in our district, we could say that the safety net might be something like the attendance support program, where we've identified individuals who are struggling to attend work, which might be an indication of struggling with depression, anxiety, those types of issues. And so therefore, we're trying to help them, to stop them from actually ending up on a leave where the ambulance is. And then the fence is the programs we do with health and safety and any education do in terms of professional development. And then health promotion is what is available through our Employee Family Assistance Program, through these professional development days where people are being educated on what they can do for themselves, and also what we can do as an organization to promote health and more of that culture of care. So our first Pro-D was in October, and that was with Dr. Jody Samra, and she has a PhD, and she is a specialist on sleep. And we had her the previous school year, and we had a lot of feedback that people wanted to have her back, and we had a big waiting list. We held this session in this room, so we had a cap on the number of people who could attend, and we would probably move it to an auditorium, which we ended up doing with the next 2 sessions so that more people could attend. But I just wanted to share a couple of the responses that attendees had given. So we had 105 educators and support staff attend. And these are 3 responses that came from their evaluation of the event. Basically, we wanted to share that employees found this valuable, and that we know from our disability management that on the medical record that we receive, you see sleep issues on almost like everyone's. Basically, no matter what you're suffering, it often impacts your sleep, and then when your sleep is impacted, it impacts your ability to cope with other things. So we know this sleep is very important. Alan Keller was, he's actually a college instructor in Saskatchewan. He himself, as a teenager, was like the star student. He was actually using drugs and alcohol, and he was suicidal, but it wasn't evident because he was like the star. He got awards, and he's actually an author of 3 books, and one of his talks was how a teacher saved his life in 10 minutes. And basically it is about how everything can present okay, that you're doing well, but you're actually really struggling. And so he spent a day with us, and we had over 580 educators and staff attend Vantech. And he did 3 sessions, and people were very engaged. In fact, we had some standing room at the back. And I just want to read this first quote, reinforcing the fact that this is what one of our attendees, one of our employees wrote this, reinforcing the fact that we don't really know what is going on with another person. Things can look fine or good on the outside, but that may not be the case. It could be deeply struggling on the inside. I think that Alan's personal challenges that he shares openly give amazing credibility to what he is presenting, and also hope that one can change their course in life. And then the second comment, which I thought was valuable, was the presentation was extremely validating, and I walked away with 2 useful tools that I will use in my classroom today. And his third session was on compassion fatigue, because as teachers, they're caring very much for all the people at the classroom, all the students. And so he also made this analogy that just like when you go on a plane and the stewardess, goes through, or the steward goes through the drill about if the oxygen changes in the cabin, you're instructed to put your face mask on first before you help others. He used the same analogy in his chat with our educators, that you need to look after yourself in order to be able to look after others. So I think that it was an encouraging day for both of them. And then most recently, on May 17th, we had Desiree Nielsen. She's an awesome speaker, also an author. She's a nutritionist, and she did, in a very natural and easy to understand way, talk about how we can basically nourish our bodies, and by doing these things, we can also help prevent diseases and improve the quality of our life. And she gave amazing statistics, including how we're really starving as a society, because a lot of the food we eat is really more of a chemical science experiment than actual food that your great-grandmother might have made. So the real takeaway with her that I found valuable is, when you look at things in the grocery store, when you look at the ingredients, does it read like your grandmother's recipe, or does it read like a science experiment? If it reads like your grandmother's recipe, buy it. If it doesn't, leave it on the shelf. So we had 425 educators attend. Again, we held this at a school, and also there was support staff in attendance. And I will just give you a minute to read. Thought about that. She does other talks as well, specifically on diabetes and other topics. So we'll probably have her back, because overwhelmingly, both Alan Keller and this one, we had like 95% response saying it was excellent and that they would like to hear that. So what else are we doing? Actually, the very first one, mental health first aid, was recommended to us from ETF Labor Management. I believe the BCTF had trained some of our union reps, and they had taken this 2-day training and recommended to us that we should look into it. So we did. And I believe Patty and Leah did it in the fall. And then we had a pilot group of about 20 administrators and myself in May, I think it was, that we did that. And we also are doing some training with Working Minds, which is a 1-day program for our people leaders, so being our principal and our exam management. And we've also had train the trainer on that one, so that we'll be able to roll it out to all of our, which will be a half day. And just show a little bit about that. The mental health first aid, it was 2 days. It's sponsored by the Canadian Mental Health Association. It's a very strict curriculum, so if you miss any part of the 2-day session, you don't get a certificate, so it's very serious. The topics that we learned was what is a mental health issue, what is mental illness, and then specifically about substance overdose, suicide, panic attack, acute stress reaction, and psychotic episodes. Now, we weren't trained, so in 2 days, it's not that we would be able to diagnose. We'd never be able to diagnose. What it's like is St. John's Ambulance for physical, where you're there as a first responder to keep a person safe until professional help comes. They've equated this program exactly the same, is that those of us who have taken the mental health first aid, we're not suddenly counselors and we're not suddenly physicians, but we have enough knowledge to keep someone safe until professional help comes. So that was a very worthwhile program, and thank you to the ETF for mentioning to us. Working Minds is another program that is sponsored by the Canadian Mental Health Association, and it is really helping an organization to increase the psychologically safe workplace, to increase how we speak to one another, how we interact, how when someone is having a struggle, how you can talk to them without they don't feel stigmatized, but that they feel that someone is noticing, someone is. And I believe on the next slide, this was what we learned with the first aid. Sorry, this is a little bit out of order. This is what we learned with the first aid. So as first aid responders, we don't have to necessarily go in this order, but the first thing we have to do is if someone comes to us or we're made aware of someone struggling, we have to assess for risk of suicide or harm, listen non-judgmentally, give reassurance, encourage professional support, and encourage other supports. And in the 2 days, what they really go through is if someone was at immediate risk of suicide, they have a plan, they know what they're going to do, and they tell you, then it's 911 to stay with them or help them get to the hospital, whatever is the appropriate thing to do in that moment. And if they're not at immediate need, but they aren't like immediately thinking about suicide, but they're still maybe very traumatized or something, then to listen, to find out what support they have to offer the different support that we might have through, for example, our family assistance program, and also through their professional doctor and friends, to find out where they're at. Then the Working Mind, which is the 8-hour course, what they focus on is that everyone can be somewhere on this continuum. You can be healthy, but then something can happen which could cause you to move over into the red where you're ill, or somewhere in between. Just like you could have had a mental health issue, but it doesn't mean that you will for the rest of your life. You can move back to green and healthy. So it's talking about it's normalizing. It's trying to help people understand that they're not labeled, that you're not like forever in the red or the orange or the yellow or the green, but all of us through different events in our life, different triggers could end up there, and how we can help each other and really care. Another area that we want to focus on in the new year is a health risk assessment, partnering with Blue Cross, who's our extended health and dental provider. It's going to be our group life provider. And what a chronic illness is ongoing. It persists indefinitely, and it may be progressive and incurable. And Health Canada recognizes 10 major chronic illnesses, and they're heart disease, stroke, cancer, asthma, cardio, diabetes, Alzheimer's, arthritis, depression, and anxiety. And in a survey done through the health organization, 84% of Canadians believe that their employer is responsible to support their physical health, and 86% of Canadians believe their employer is responsible to support their mental health. So what we're hoping to do with the help of Pacific Blue Cross is to help individuals identify what, because so many people don't have a family doctor now, so they would bring in pharmacists who would be able to meet with individuals. This would be volunteer, so we're not forcing anyone to do this, but volunteer, who could be assessed to find out if they have any heart conditions, any one of these chronic diseases, so that hopefully they could get the help and it's an earlier intervention, because some things like cholesterol is silent. You don't necessarily have any symptoms, so you wouldn't necessarily know to go and report it to a doctor. Same with heart disease. Probably many of us in this room have lost someone to a heart attack, just like that, of any age, and there was no, and maybe very surprising that happened. So these are ways that we could help our employee not have gone to the doctor because they have no presenting symptoms, to discover that, and it will help us to know what areas to focus. And then our final slide is about increasing online wellness. So our PSB is launching sometime in the fall a new staff intranet site, and we have a wellness page pretty much ready to go. And also our employee family assistance program, Morneau Chappelle, has recently acquired LifeWorks, which is a more robust platform, and will add more features for our staff, including some fun things like discounts and perks that they'll be able to take part in. And also we have currently we offer depression care as part of our assistance program, which is 12 hours available to anyone who is identified as moderately to severe depressed, if they were to phone into Chappelle, and they answer some questions, and this is how the identification. So it's offered again voluntarily to them, but they are increasing for our next year trauma care and also something called Care Plus. So there's also been identification that a single event or something that leads up can cause significant anxiety or other events. It's maybe not depression, but maybe prevents people from attending work or enjoying their life to the full extent that we want them to. And so this is also going to be a 12-hour program offered as part of our employee family assistance program, and it includes immediate access to a psychologist, just like the depression care does, and cognitive behavior training. And then a third item that's going to be added is something called Care Plus, which is an online. So again, employees can access it 24/7. They don't have to talk to anyone. It's actually a course online. And it's to assist individuals with insomnia anxiety, and obsessive compulsive disorder. So these are some of the new features of our employee wellness assistance program.
And I just wanted to add that we have had a few meetings with our stakeholder group, and once we sort of land, we were waiting for budget, but once we land on strategy, we'll be again in the fall, sort of outlining the steps, like the health thing was talked about the pharmacists. We had, we said, we're not going to go into your classroom and do anything, but it would be like a flu clinic, like when we run our flu clinics, we would say, so we're also going to have a clinic for a health analysis. And so we talked about that, but once we actually have our formalized strategy, this is some of the work that we're doing, but once formalized, we again rolling.
Yeah, well, we're doing lots of good things. Do you have any questions? Yes.
Chair, I know that your focus is on employees. Deepak, I mean, these sound like wonderful presentations and wonderful resources, and I know that Deepak has done a number of things including trying to strengthen our parent communities. Is there any opportunities, say, leadership of PAC at schools or maybe parent advocates to get the benefit of some of these workshops?
Chair, that's a great idea. It is these costly speakers, and we have a waiting list for our employees actually to go. But I mean, if there was some funding opportunity, we could work with PPAC and trying to get speakers and some.
We'll move on to 2.3, recruitment update, verbal update. Superintendent and staff.
Thank you, Chair. We have a lot of information this month, and recruitment is very active and ongoing, so it changes hourly, and it would be really fair to do a report that was going to be inaccurate. So I do have some, just some stats that I can give to you about some high level. Right now, we're looking, this year we have 13 administrators leaving, either resigning or retiring from Vancouver. So we're fulfilling those assignments. At this time, 86 teachers retired. Support staff, about 100, right between resigning and retiring. I can tell you since the last report in April, we've hired 67 teachers. 6 teachers came from Ontario. We have 2 from France. I think 1 signed on, 1 more to be. And that's exciting news. The other thing that we did this month, which was a first for us in my history here, all of our teachers are qualified with Teacher Regulation Branch, and we don't have anyone on our position because we are lucky that we have qualified teachers. We in tech studies have had some challenges, and so we had some names come to us from BCIT tech studies, individuals who are finished and are going into the teaching program. So what we did was filled out all the paperwork, and Superintendent Hoffman signed the form, and we contacted the ministry and the TRB, and so we got 2 letters of permission for 2 tech studies teachers that immediately went into assignments as soon as they were hired. One started on Monday, and 1 is starting tomorrow. So it is a very unusual step for Vancouver because generally we are lucky that we do have qualified teachers. But this was sort of an extra step to make sure that we are as much as possible trying to fill our vacancies with the qualifications that are needed for that. So that's sort of the teaching piece. And 96, between the last report, 96 support staff hires, including 29 SSAs, 23 laborers, 68 supervisions, 10 custodians, 8 office support, some technical support, some cafeteria, an adult ed on-call instructors that sort of made up the 96. And again, this is from April to now. and some will probably hire today. We are currently also interviewing our Burnaby EA program partnership. They are finishing their practicums in a couple of weeks. We are sent out the team to Garibaldi, and we're finishing up interviewing a number of them. So far, 16 have been interviewed, and we're going to have 2 July cohorts at Garibaldi, so that's exciting news. So recruitment is very, very busy at this point, so that's why I just wanted to give you sort of a high-level, quick verbal report, and I'll give you finalized stats in the fall once we have that. We opened up teacher postings, 260 teacher postings, which is lower than the past 2 years at this time of year. We are going to have a second round that opens next week. And we did simultaneously post some on Make a Future. We posted XK, so we wanted to try to find Indigenous teachers as much as possible for vacancies there. And tech studies, French immersion, I think was also posted on Make a Future. From TOC assignments and trying to recruit for our district, guaranteeing them employment. That's sort of a quick overview of what we've done since the last.
Thank you. Certainly really hard. Questions on, yes, Ruby.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Just on the cafeteria teachers. Remember, I know that our district, we had shortage of cafeteria teachers. 2 years ago, we had to close a program at Templeton, I believe, because we didn't have a qualified teacher. That's what my understanding is. Again, that's why the program was closed. So, do we have a shortage of cafeteria teachers right now?
Shortage, I think, the students request blocks, and so if there's no course requests for the blocks. So if there was a student request and they had enough jobs, we would be posting a position. But I'd have to look back to 2 years ago if that's what you're referring
Yes,
to. But
yes.
This time it's really about course requests since it's an elective. I think the teacher retired from there, and I think that
Yes, yeah.
I think a lot of the kids sign up.
Yeah, I guess thank you for that. Through the chair. So yeah, just maybe I think maybe it'll be a follow-up question because that school, I think they had like 7 teaching blocks the year before or 6, and all of a sudden that was the reason that, to my understanding, was given. They those electives were not offered to the students because we did not have qualified teacher for that school. So again, you can probably look on your end, but that was my understanding was, or our union's understanding was. Templeton, yes. Yeah, just one more, but that can wait.
Just a question through the chair. So at the last update, there was an update around this secondary student teachers and doing like an info session. We did an update around elementary because I know we have different practicum timelines, and so just what for our current elementary up, hopefully, and that.
Chair, I think it was last weekend. All the weeks they were a blur. Either last week or the week before, we had them in this room. We had about 100, and again, we have shortlisting and interviewing. Secondary, almost done. They do finish their practice.
Janet, sorry.
You talked about 2 cohorts of EAs at Garibaldi. How many students in each cohort?
Share with them 32, I believe, but it's still interviewing candidates. Right now we're up to about 50 confirmed. So that's at least 5 in each cohort.
And 2 cohorts in July, so they would be one more, or do we have enough space to?
We have enough space at Garibaldi that we could have enough instructors and enough space to run them at the same time, because they're 9 to 3.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Second question is on the, I know you, Associate Superintendent, to give a number of 96 sports staff recruitment from April to now. I tried to write down the numbers. Can you repeat the numbers, please? There was 10 custodians. Were there any engineers numbers as well?
Had 10 custodians, so for your IOE group is 10 custodians, cafeteria, and then 1 AD1 at this time. Since last report.
Sorry, the number for supervision aides?
16.
Thank
You talked about the BCIT, the two people coming from BCIT with letters of permission. Did you say that they are going to be going into a teacher program, or maybe I missed quite what their qualifications are?
Chair, they have the appropriate tech studies qualification. They don't have their teaching degree. That's why we have to get the application. They are enrolled in UBC this September, so we only have them for this month.
That's the.
We went through a lot of work to get them for this month.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, back to Associate Superintendent. Just clearly, the board is working very hard to hire teachers and hire support staff. And I guess you said 67 have been hired. But at this time, what is our TTOC list at, and where is your goal? How close are you to the goal of reaching, being able to maintain the regular ability to support teachers who are sick and away, teachers because there's still an inability to fully engage in some in-service or some pro-B opportunities, and then remedy is persistent as well. So also the ability to cover those needs as well. So I'm just wondering how close or how much closer you are getting, or are you getting closer to hitting a number that works?
Chair, time of year where we're going to start sending out the reports for our on-call staff, see how many are coming back. And at that point, as I said, we are just recruiting and hiring and hiring. That's I haven't set a number that's going to be a limit at this time, because I want to ensure that, as you said, we are able to fill all vacancies. So at this time, get that information back and now analyze the numbers. But at this time, I have not put a ceiling on any employee per se.
Questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Item number 3, discussion items. Just the feedback piece on the mandatory rules immunizations. We had requested from stakeholder groups feedback on these. To go back to your groups. We'll take notes. So I'd like to go around starting this way. To provide. Appreciate that.
Through the chair, we were discussing sort of how the management of the rollout would be. So currently, parents will register the children online, and then they're asked to verify their registration. So they come into the school with their children's identifications and proof of address. After that, we welcome them to Ready, Set, Learn event, as well as Welcome to K, where the Vancouver Coastal Health nurse is there talking with the parents. So which is within that timeline, if there was a mandatory immunization, how would that, and if students are being denied access to education, who would be the ones to tell them that?
Yeah, I don't think we're there yet. I think we're just listening to feedback at this point from what people think is appropriate of our needs as a district. So it's really soliciting data at this point to make that determination. Yeah, take more questions to Vancouver. What do you know?
Yeah, so I took it to our executive and we really talked about it, and we really just ended up with more questions than answers at this point. So we had questions just around, would this be extended to employee groups as being any kind of a mandatory piece, and how that would work if children have that as a mandatory thing, would that extend to employees? And would employees expected to be paying for that cost kind of thing? Those were just some of the questions. And the other question that came out was, would it be more than just the measles vaccine? Like, would it include other vaccinations? Like the HPV vaccination, or, with the flu vaccination, like how wide is that scope in terms of what we're looking at? Again, we had some questions just around what would the process be for the family can't prove vaccinations, and who delivers that message and how that works, because teachers have questions around that immediately, going, how does that work? And connecting it to the human rights piece, just around the right to have an education. So we didn't say yay or nay or anything like that. We just said we've got lots of questions, and I said, yeah, I'll bring it here and let you know. So thinking about, so.
Can I maybe request that you submit those questions?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And then we can collate all that information and send it off. Okay. Feedback, anything?
Yeah, I'm not a regular rep at this committee, but I don't remember having this discussion at executive board yet. So, but I will definitely let Jim know that, and they can go directly.
If anybody has anything to add, perhaps end of June, just to submit and then follow up based on the. Okay, nothing left on that. Let's move on. Items for approval, there's none. There's no information item requests. I do want to acknowledge, congratulate both groups, Q4 7 and our operations team, getting their tables. And we wish continued dialogue with the others that are still negotiating about that. Just to point out, our next meeting is October 9th.
We're gonna have a cake.
That's great. So thanks to everybody who's spent time this past year to come out and contribute to the South Committee. I've certainly enjoyed it as chair, and I look forward to summer break. To be honest, I'm sure everybody is, just to recoup and get ready for everybody.
I am doubling up tonight.